Welcome, sports fans, to the regular season finale of the Detroit Lions tomorrow. In this edition, I will talk about the Buccaneers game. I will go over the stats and the injuries before the Lions play the Vikings in their season finale tomorrow at Ford Field. And I have a few stories for you and a prediction at the end. In this segment, I'm going to recap the Buccaneers game from last week. That is, if you want to call it a game. Some may call it a debacle, and I think that would be a good term for it. But however you want to describe it, it was a pretty awful effort on the part of the Lions. I think everybody can pretty much agree upon that, whether they're a Lions fan or not. However, there are some things that I saw that some people may not have caught. First of all, the Buccaneers on their first possession, the Lions had stopped them, but then got a very controversial penalty, and I believe it was a rigging call because I did not see a penalty on that play, as I recall. And that led, or actually, you know what, I think that was a legitimate call, come to think of it, which led the Buccaneers getting a second opportunity, and Tom Brady took advantage of that and threw a long touchdown pass at that, I believe. However, they missed the extra point and they were ahead 6-0. Lions went out quickly on their possession. Buccaneers got the ball back, marched it right down the field, got another touchdown, more long passes. This time they made the extra point and were ahead 13-0. Continued like this throughout the rest of the first half. Tom Brady ended up throwing 4 touchdown passes in the half. The Buccaneers had, I think it was 354 yards at halftime. The 284 yards passing was a record and a half for a Buccaneers quarterback. The 4 touchdown passes were a record for a half for a Buccaneers quarterback. And the Lions had 53 yards of offense and no points, and were trailing 34-0 at halftime. In the second half, same thing. Buccaneers went down the field, got another touchdown, did miss the extra point. Now it's 40-0. At this time already, though I was unaware of it, that was already more points than the Buccaneers had ever scored against the Lions. On the ensuing possession, the Lions went out quickly again. Matt Stafford was already out of the game because he had to leave in the first quarter due to his ankle or knee or something in that area, and I believe it was his ankle that wasn't feeling quite right, and he did not return to the game. Now Chase Daniel had been in there. He wasn't really doing anything, and it turned out to be his worst outing, I thought, of the year. Lions gave the ball back to the Buccaneers. This time, though, the Lions were actually able to stop them, and on the ensuing punt, Jamal Agnew broke it open and was able to return it for a touchdown. Lions made the extra point and cut the lead to 40-7, and unbeknownst to everybody at the time, that turned out to be the only points the Lions would get all day. Buccaneers came right back again, got another touchdown, up the lead to 47-7. I believe it was in the fourth quarter. They were in field goal range, and this is what ticked me off in addition to what I'll mention in a minute. Bruce Arians actually tries a field goal, and thankfully the field goal hit the upright, so they didn't get to 50 points, which would have been not only the first time in their franchise history, I believe they would have made it to 50 points, but it would have been the first 50-point game the Lions would have given up at Ford Field, and the first one at home since the 49ers scored 55 against them in 1993. Also, it would have been the first 50-point game given up to them since I believe it was the Chargers, it was either the Chargers or the Eagles, in 2007, since they both scored 50 against them that year, and I believe the Eagles actually scored 51 against them, if I recall correctly, in that game. But thankfully, they missed the extra point, and then the rest of the game was scoreless. However, by the end, the Buccaneers threw for 477 yards, and the Lions had about 156 yards of offense or something like that. What really ticked me off, though, was there were some calls against the Lions that I thought were rigging calls, and the Buccaneers were not getting called for anything, which is highly unusual because the NFL tries to keep these games close if you're not aware of that. But that didn't happen in this case, much like I believe it didn't happen when the Saints played the Broncos, because the Broncos messed up and didn't have their quarterbacks, and this was the NFL's way of sending a firm message to the Lions that you really screwed up and we're not going to help you out. That part I could probably live with a little bit, but what I couldn't live with is Bruce Arians not only continuing to have his quarterbacks throw the football, which Tom Brady was in there for way too long. He had Blaine Gabbert throwing the ball deep. And I'm like, what's up with that? And that was just crap in my opinion. But he still did it, and he had a lot of the starters in there for too long. Mike Evans was in there long enough to get his 13th touchdown reception, which tied his personal record, which was the Buccaneers franchise record, until he had his 14th touchdown reception, which now set the franchise record for most touchdowns by a receiver in a season. That's the part that really started to annoy me. And as badly as I felt after the game, I wanted to make sure I took this like a man, and I did. Especially when I saw Chris Spielman standing there on the sideline. And as much as it sickened me and it felt like, one extremely hard punch, if not several hard punches to my gut, I can imagine what it felt like to him. And if Sheila Ford was watching the game as well, I can only imagine what this must have felt like to her, since the Texans game was enough for her to put her head in her hands. In any event, thankfully the fourth quarter was scoreless, and the final score wound up being 47-7. But still, the Buccaneers set many more records in that game. The most points they scored against the Lions, their largest margin of victory against them, and also they have scored 85 points the last two games against the Lions, which also is a franchise record within the series. I mean, just an awful, awful effort by the Lions. I knew it wasn't going to be good. I didn't think it was going to be that bad, however. In the next segment, I'm going to preview the Lions game with the Vikings, and I will start by doing the rankings for both teams. Stay tuned to the Detroit Lions tomorrow on Ed's Sports Channel.